Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Audit Committee. I'm Councillor Jason Charity, Chair of Audit Committee. This is not a public meeting, but one the public may attend. Just a few housekeeping matters. Fire evacuation, no drill is expected. If a fire alarm sounds, leave the chamber, turn right and exit via the ground floor stairway. The assembly point is in the public square beyond the fountain, just outside. Anyone with mobility issues should wait in the refuge area near the lift and use the intercom for assistance. This meeting will be recorded and published on the Council's website and YouTube channel. By entering the chamber, you consent to being recorded. If anyone intends to record proceedings, please do so without disrupting the meeting. Just a reminder, friendly reminder, turn phones off or onto silent as well. And just before we dive into the agenda, which looks like a light one today, I'm putting on record that members of this audit committee will be calling a special meeting under the Constitution. That meeting will examine governance matters of significant public interest arising from the DSA funding approval process, specifically assurance oversight, how legal advice has been used, communicated and characterised, particularly statements regarding the external counsel's view of the chair of this committee and whether constitutional and professional standards have been properly applied. These are serious questions and they require answers, and this committee intends to get to them. The Audit Committee exists to provide independent assurance to the people of Doncaster, not to officers, not to the executive, but to the public. Where concerns of this magnitude arise, we have a duty to act. We will not be managed, we will not be obstructed, and we will not look the other way. We will examine the evidence through formal recorded process. We will follow the evidence wherever it leads, and we will determine whether escalations through the Council's constitutional routes, including the Chief Officer investigatory process, is warranted. The papers will be served on the Chief Executive via Democratic Services immediately following this meeting. Agenda item number 1, we have apologies from Councillor Carroll, and I think we've got Dr. Green on his way. I think he's running a little bit late, so we'll note for the minutes when he arrives. Exclusion of the public and press. I don't think we have any items on the agenda which requires either the public or press to be excluded today. Declaration of interest. Anything from members?
Yes, please, Chair. I will probably ask questions around some of the education because I work for an education trade union, so I just want to declare that.
Okay, thank you. And do we need to just, Amber, will Gemma need to complete the necessary paperwork? Fantastic, thank you. Item number 4, minutes of the Audit Committee meeting held on the 26th of November 2025. Can the minutes be moved as a true and accurate record? Thank you, Frank. And seconded, Councillor Cox. Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item number 5. As all members have read the reports, can I invite Peter Jackson, Head of Internal Audit, if he wishes to bring any specific issues to members' attention or has anything to add since the report was drafted. Pete, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add. There's 2 incomplete actions, and those will be met at the next meeting in April. Happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions for?
Page 9, Peter. You circulated 2 documents. One was regarding the Council's warning regarding the sound system. I think we all appreciate that it appears to be out of control and is probably not within our remit to try and draw it back. We're waiting for central government. How are we controlling it at the moment?
I think that's a really interesting but very complicated question to answer, because in terms of SEND, we've spent quite a bit of time on because it's part of the AGS, outlining the multi dimensional aspects of how the council is working with the school system as best it can in order to manage that. So it's not going to be something we can quickly answer, because we've already spent an awful lot of time, you know, in terms of covering that matter. So other than directing you to, you know, a conversation we've had elsewhere, and we can again, by all means, it's not something that can simply be answered.
No, thank you, Debbie. I'm sure you appreciate that it raises major concerns regarding the finance.
We will be bringing it back to the committee at the appropriate time. Next week is the final government settlement, so we expect to receive some further information on that. The school's white paper is due to be released any time as well. So the next update we're timing with, you know, when we've got further information to inform you in terms of what the future are. And as Debbie said, I think the last meeting we covered quite a bit in terms of dedicated schools grant, and Rihanna attended to kind of talk about what they were doing as well. So we'll be continuing that through scrutiny as well in terms of those from a performance perspective. And then we'll bring something back to this committee, because it is a key strategic risk, and we did look at, we've got the deep dives into strategic risks as well. So we will be bringing it back from that perspective, like I say, when we've got more information as well in terms of some of the solutions potentially.
Yeah, sorry, and sorry, Councillor. Yeah, I was going to say, Faye touched on it. We've got the deep dives, and I've done sort of like a provisional programme which I need to run through with Chair and other members of the committee. It may well be that April's committee will be an appropriate point to have a look at the updated SEND position and the risk rating that it presents.
And my second question is regarding the ERP system, the Enterprise Resource Planning, which is the core business processes. It was quite an interesting read. How has that benefited Doncaster?
It's not benefited Doncaster yet. We're just at the early stages of implementation. So we're going through the planning and preparing, but there are lots of benefits that we are expecting really in terms of that system implementation, and we can provide more further detail on that to you, Councillor Jackson.
Thank you.
Of course, Debbie, yep.
Thank you. It provides benefits, but fundamentally it's an essential requirement. It provides the backbone to how the organisation works. So without a system that manages the accounting, the integration of multiple systems, you know, you only need to look at some other councils where the implementation of their ERP system hasn't been affected effectively, the weaknesses that brings about. So I can absolutely understand why you're asking about benefits. For me, it's about, and the reason why it's in view, is it's essential to have it as part of your core requirements of the organisation. So from a risk management point of view, we need to be more about how it's providing core functionality so that the council can function, and then, you know, the benefits of other integrations are like the icing on the cake. So if we can look at it from through that lens, absolutely think about the subsequent benefits, but the first thing is getting the core functionality right.
I mean, we all appreciate that technology has to advance. So what is the cost of this system?
I think we'll get into specifics another time if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. I appreciate it's a really complex piece of technology. I just have one question, just about the outstanding two items. I appreciate there's only two items, but is there anything driving why they're late? Is it data availability, resourcing? Is it priority of teams?
No, absolutely not, Chair. They're not late. They are simply scheduled to be resolved at April's Audit Committee meeting, because that's the next scheduled report for breaches and waivers, which is what the items are actually covering.
Right.
So they're not overdue in any way.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that clarification, Pete. Any final questions? No? Okay, great. We'll move on to agenda item number 6. internal audit report for the period October to December 2025. Pete, I think we're back to you on this one.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to highlight a few important points within this report. So, Section 2 references investigative work, and this is covered in detail in the following agenda item. I'd also like committee to note the development of the team in terms of formal qualifications that have taken place over the last year. We've got our trainee having passed her apprenticeship now. 2 of the team have passed their counter-fraud qualifications, and 1 member of the team is now a fully qualified IIA auditor, so that's a positive development. Section 3, overdue actions. Improvements have been made to the position that we reported at the previous quarter, where there was quite a significant increase. We've brought that number back down to what I consider an acceptable level. We've done a lot of work with the directors, and we're going to make sure that they're aware of a large number of recommendations coming up. If you notice on the table of the actions not yet due, there's quite a lot still coming up, so we're being very tight with them and making sure that they don't suddenly become overdue and we end up with a large blip arising. Section 4, please note the assurances, the positive assurances around the AGS items, work delivered by the team sufficient to form an opinion over my annual opinion for risk governance and control, and indications currently are that I'll be giving a positive opinion. And finally, the section on the global internal audit standards, and just giving you a heads up that there'll be a template that's being released from CIPFA imminently, and that'll be provided to yourselves for some feedback. There's also a separate one for senior management as well. So that's it in terms of like an overview. Chair, I'm happy to take any questions.
Open to the committee. Gemma, you got a question?
I've got a few relating to the appendix questions around the growth of risks in the CYPF directorate. Am I right to take these now? Like to ask these now, Chair? There's quite a few.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. Obviously, I think last meeting we had was a risk that came through from before I was a minor, but then there's quite a bit growth of risks regarding to the governance. So I've got a few questions regarding why is it such a high risk when we did have there was an initial one, I remember from the last report when we last met. What scrutiny do you look for you have in reviewing like education establishments finances, and kind of what's in place to support head teachers and governors from preventing further deficit?
Okay, so the specific establishment that's been reported upon here with the overdue actions is the establishment that were reported at last committee, where we gave a limited assurance opinion. It's quite complicated, the arrangements with this establishment, and there's having to be like management action taken to resolve the sort of governance and control issues which came out of our audit, and were also accompanied by a commissioned review into the operation of the school. So the sort of two do go together. That was a review requested by management within Children's Directorate to support the ongoing review that they had there. In terms of sort of like the wider overview over schools, traditionally we used to do a lot of individual schools audits, but over time the regulations didn't require us to do that. So we're more reliant on our sort of intelligence within the council. So we'll monitor any budgets that are going into deficit. That will then trigger meetings. Is it something that audit might want to become involved in? Would it helpful to have an audit just to see if we're, you know, we've got tight financial and management arrangements in place or not? So it's more through sort of like the intelligence that we've got within the council rather than a routine set of planned audits.
Thank you. obviously I noted in the report it says lack of central oversight as well, so I'm assuming that's going to be improved as part of this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, this has highlighted that we need to be a bit tighter on that, and there's also a couple of other things that we want to sort of roll out to make sure that we don't experience the same problems elsewhere.
Sorry, I had a few questions. Is there anything that, any decisions that has been made, because obviously they talk about core of meetings, and also not following processes as part of the risk as well. Is there anything else other than finances that the audit committee should know about, particularly in this directorate, that's caused a high risk?
I don't think there's anything more that audit committee need to know about. There are some sort of education related matters which are being dealt with as part of the arrangements to improve the overall management of the school. There was a very comprehensive report done by us, and this summarises up the key matters that arose from it, or the key matters that are now outstanding as high risk actions. We're in regular discussions with the head and the business manager to check progress that's being made against these high risk items. All of the ones that we can see on that appendix have all arisen in the last few months. It's not like the long standing items, so hopefully I'm giving you a bit of reassurance that this isn't stuff that's malingering away. However, I don't think there's going to be some quick solutions to a couple of the ones around the education establishment.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Gemma. I think we'll move on to other questions, but if we've got time at the end, Gemma, you've got further questions on this subject, we can sort of take them. Any other questions from any of the members? Councillor Cox.
Pete, sorry, it mentions in 1.4 that flood prevention works have been removed from the plan due to other high priority work within the Place Directorate and will be reassessed as part of the 26-27 planning process. So can you just tell us what it's been replaced by?
It's not necessarily been replaced by. We have to look at what priorities we've got in terms of the audit plan, and making sure that we're sort of delivering the work that's of most priority. So that is not a particularly time-bound piece of work, so that can be sort of moved into next year. A lot of the audits that have had to be sort of put through into the next year are around the resources that we've had to put into carrying out a lot of investigative work. So that is sort of part of the factors behind it as well.
So I suppose just to add into that really, in terms of Pete's looking at what work he needs to do for the rest of the year to provide his opinion. He's looking at what investigations need to take place. So he's doing that constant review of, well, this is my resources I've got available. What's the most priority really in terms of delivery, and then kind of doing that balancing, and kind of what he's assessed is that actually that one can kind of delay until a future, until next year, and will be then reassessed when we're doing the plan for 26-27 against the priorities for 26-27.
Just for Pete, quick follow on maybe. So was that original piece in the annual internal audit plan which audit committee signed off?
Yes, Chair, all these pieces of work were in the original plan. And just building on what Faye said, yeah, this quarter is when we are building up our thoughts for the plan for 26-27. So as well as concentrating what we need to deliver in this quarter, we're mindful of what we can sensibly put through into the next quarter as well. So it's a bit of a balancing exercise.
Debbie.
Yeah, I suppose you just, in terms of the lens that Pete's looking through all the time, just amplify, I think, what Faye was indicating, is concentrating on the most high risk, and with the resources that are available. That's so it's I can see where the question was about substitution, but if you look at that paragraph, there's a whole load of things that are being traded off. it'll be important as part of setting the overall plan for you to understand the risk assessment of the council, in order then to consider as part of your role, then to make sure that there's a complete alignment between the risks that there are in the organisation and the resources that are available from a committee point of view, but from an internal audit perspective as well, and to make sure that they're aligned. And that's largely, so that's why, you know, things like primary schools and where there's been other insurance activities, they're fairly low order in the risk assessment that Pete's undertaking, because he needs to prioritise, you know, where something's red hot, that's where he needs to spend his time on, and him and his team.
Yeah, I don't know if it's standard audit speak, because it references several times that it's been removed from the plan due to higher priority work, which I understand what you said, I understand the balance, but I think it's the way it's worded, it almost implies that you've taken it out to put that in. So yeah, reading it, no, but I think reading it, that's what it implies to the non-audit person. When
I looked at that paragraph, I thought there could be, in terms of just keep referencing back to your, so that you've got sight of what the plan and how it's dynamic, because you would expect Pete to be doing that all the time, and it's how, because it looks too, I think your point is it looks too stark.
It gives me the impression you're taking that out and putting that in, which is where the question came from.
Yeah,
and clearly
it's
not, but that's what the paragraph's implying.
Yeah. It needs to be set in the context. I think that's the chair's point, is how does that reference back to the starting point in terms of what the plan is, and that assessment between things that are really in view, things that might be so essential and desirable, because that's really, there's, you know, I have like in my head, like a bit of like a universe where you've got something that's really close to the centre, and that you've got some of the stars which are further out at the fringes. And Pete needs to keep his view on the things that are right in the middle of the orbit, rather than the stuff that's right on that's if he's got the time, you know, they're all under control, or there is more capacity, because we've allowed for, say, sickness that's not have occurred, or that there's been less special investigations, then he can deploy it on that wider, you know, outer hemisphere activities. But if there isn't, then he's always going to keep that close review. And that's really what you're doing, is making sure that he is keeping his attention on that inner orbit.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on the discussion that we're having, two of the items at the end of the list that we added on are grants, and they are very time-bound. We weren't cited on them. We got very late notification from central government, so those have to be done. That obviously impacts on work that was planned to be done, so that's a factor as well. You'll notice the final item on the dropped side, as it were, is the payroll audit. So we got other forms of assurance over our payroll system. So instead, we've put resources into looking at additional payments, which is an item that we've added. So in some cases, there is a sort of like-for-like swap. In other cases, it isn't. It's just utilising the general pool of resource that I've got to the work that will add most value to the organisation.
Thank you, Pete. Debbie. I guess my only question would be, and I sort of recognise that risk is dynamic and priorities change, and it's great that we're responding to that. But this committee approves the internal audit plan. If there's a material change to that plan, including moving some scope from this year into a future year, that should come back to this committee, be presented, and a re-baseline plan approved. So what we shouldn't be doing is shifting the plan around within the year, which is a deviation from the approved plan, and sort of coming back to this committee after the fact to tell us that something's shifted. So I think we fully understand priorities change, and we support that. But the process is that this audit committee approves the plan and owns the internal audit plan that's presented by you, Pete. So any sort of amendment of that plan has to come back to this committee before the work starts. Can you just confirm that?
Chair, the terms of reference are that if there are significant changes to the plan, then those have to be approved by committee. So the discussion is around what's actually a significant change. These are routine changes that any audit team makes. I've checked with my peers, I've checked with SIPFA. What we're doing is right, it's in compliance with the standards which expect agile planning, risk-based planning. It's meant to be responsive to changes that take place in the organisation. These are routine. When we had, for example, COVID, that meant the plan had to be completely rewritten. So halfway through the year, when we'd hit a little bit of stability, as it were, within the council, we rewrote the plan. The plan was reissued to council and it gone through senior management as well to make sure that it was felt to be appropriate given the circumstances that we're in. So that is how we met the terms of reference and how we met our audit standards. So, Chair, I think that the way that we're reporting on the changes to the plan is completely in compliance with expectations.
Can I just add, really, thank you, in terms of the strategy as well. The strategy demonstrates in terms of that agility, and we're also looking at the strategy to see if we can add some further wording in terms of significant, you know, so that we can actually provide more guidance really in terms of in the strategy that significance.
No, that's good. Thank you for the clarification, Pete. I think it would be useful if you could take an action to bring back to this committee a report that defines what significance is. I know we've had offline robust conversations around the definition of significance, and it's, I think, clearly articulated in the regulations, but just to benefit perhaps the sort of the wider audit committee, I think having some clear boundaries so we understand when you have a mandate to shift resources because it's non-significant and when things need to come back to this committee, I think that'd be really, really useful.
Thank you, Chair, and that's what will be in the strategy. So when the strategy is brought to committee, it will include that information requested on significance. So rather than a separate paper, it will be incorporated into the strategy paper.
Brilliant, thank you. And just colleagues from external audit, I don't know whether either of you have an opinion on this.
Always got an opinion. So, yeah, I mean, I do think the committee have a point. So I understand kind of Pete's point about kind of what is significant, but in terms of kind of if things were in the original plan and potentially then won't be done in the year, I think it would be best practice to potentially bring it back to yourselves. So that would be my view, but it is a best practice, I would say. So I guess it's for officers in the committee to agree that.
Okay, thank you. Feels like we're going to pick this conversation up through the report. I think it would be good to follow best practice unless there's a very strong argument to deviate from it. But I think we'll sort of pause that conversation and we'll come back to it in the future. My only question, Pete, is in the appendix, there's a reference to an assurance report on page 22 relating to South Yorkshire Airport City. And again, just for clarity with colleagues, this is a sort of an item that Peter and I have been in discussions with over previous months. Just to confirm, was this in the original or the approved internal audit plan for this year as a piece of assurance?
The plan that was approved at the start of the year had within it, as scoped then, an advisory piece of work over airport assurance. It was not clear what the sort of remit, how we could add some value over the airport was at that time. As the years progressed, it then became apparent as to how we could add some value. So there was quite a detailed appendix went to November's audit committee, which contained two pieces of work, some sort of further advisory and some thoughts on how we might gain assurance going forward. So this as scoped up now was not what was as scoped up in the audit plan. It was, however, referenced in the approved plan at the start of the year And again, it's been flexed to add value to the circumstances at the time.
Okay, thank you, Peter. And I guess I only sort of pause on that piece because assurance has a very specific legal meaning and weight in the internal audit world. And assurance is very, very different to advisory. And sort of maybe questions to the audit committee whether we feel comfortable noting an internal audit assurance report that hasn't been scoped in the internal audit plan, but has, and this might be for the right reasons, Peter, but has kind of crept into the work. And maybe question also for external audit, given we didn't have this piece of assurance in the internal audit plan, do you have a view on whether it should be included?
And could I just ask for someone to clarify for my mind what reasonable assurance means? What does that mean?
Okay, so we work on 4 levels of assurance. No assurance is obviously something that if I'm bringing to you, you're getting very worried about. Limited assurance, that's where we're not happy with the level of controls, governance, risk that's associated with the area under review. That's when it's sort of like crossed the line, we're not happy with it. The best form of assurance that we give is substantial assurance. That's where there's no areas of concern that we need to bring to your attention. Reasonable assurance sits between substantial and limited, and we're happy with arrangements, but there's areas for improvement.
It's in paragraph 2.5 of the report. So if you want to look at the definitions, they're all codified there, page 17 and page 18 of the report.
Oh, thank you. That's thanks for the clarification. I guess the substantive point is it wasn't in the internal audit plan. It's now been completed. This committee didn't have sight of that, what sounds like quite a critical piece of work, given it's about the airports and it's a significant piece of risk with investment, public scrutiny. So it feels like probably that one of the most important pieces of assurance work will probably complete this year, and this committee didn't approve it in the internal audit plan.
I think it was approved in the internal audit plan. I know there's been some consideration in terms of A and B, but overall that is the plan. So the works were completed. Whether this comes back to that point in terms of what's significant or what's, but it was in the approved plan that work was going to be undertaken on airport. I get your question is probably in terms of assurance, but it was in the approved plan.
It was as a piece of advisory work, not assurance. I mean, this is probably one of the significant areas we need to look at in a special meeting. I think if we deep dive into the individual appendices that make up the plan, Appendix A, which covers assurance activities, is actually titled Internal Audit Assurance Plan. So the appendix, which contains the piece of scope relating to the airport advisory, isn't titled Plan in Appendix C. So whilst as a collective, you could say it's within the plan, we segment the internal audit into 3 buckets of work, and it wasn't in assurance.
Chair, there's obviously a disagreement here. The plan is very clearly minuted as being appendices A, B and C. The assurance work forms an integral part of the internal audit plan. It contributes significantly to my assurance, and that's in line with best practice.
It probably is one to pick up at a later date, and I think we need to scrutinise in detail the plan. But in the plan, this is defined as a piece of advisory work, not assurance. I think that's the key point, and I don't think any of us can get away from that point. It's in black and white, Pete. In the plan, it's advisory work, not assurance, and there's a big distinction between the two. Maybe colleagues from external audit, I don't know whether you have a sort of an opinion on this.
Yeah, I think it's probably something to take away because there's obviously a misunderstanding in terms of what kind of committee believes constitutes the plan and what kind of, Pete and kind of officers believe constitutes the plan. So it probably needs just to be taken away and, clarified so everybody's clear going forward exactly kind of how that is made up.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll probably come back to this one. I do think we need to look at this in a level of detail, but I think I'm sort of minded that we don't note this report if colleagues agree until I think we sort of achieve that level of clarification. Thank you. Any final questions just before we move on? Agenda item number 7, preventing and detecting fraud and errors, 2024 to 25. Pete, I think you're in the limelight today. I think it's back to you.
It is, Chair. So this is a report that sets out many areas of counter-fraud activity, and a lot of that's carried out by the internal audit team. I think the main takeaway for the committee is that for a council of this size, the level of fraud that we're experiencing is relatively low, as I say, for an organisation of this size. What's also highlighted towards the end of the report is a number of completed and ongoing frauds that are being investigated. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thanks, Pete. Any questions from this side? Jane?
Mine wasn't a question. I think we spoke about it the other day. It was more, how can councillors and officers and whatever feed in? So if we've got a concern or we see something that we think is a bit irregular, how would we feed that into you for you to make a decision about whether or not it needed investigating?
Yeah, so it's a really important source of intelligence, information from members of the public, information from councillors, information from employees, and there's a number of different routes that we can go down. So if employees have got concerns, they can raise it through the whistleblowing process. Members of the public are also encouraged to report concerns through that route as well. There's a separate reporting route for specifically benefit fraud. There's a general fraud hotline which is responded to by members of my team. I'm always open to taking on any concerns from anybody, whether that be members of the public or councillors. What I'll do is I'll get our fraud manager to produce like a nice summary so that we've got a bit of clarity about the different lines and the appropriate routes. I think the point is to make sure that the concerns do get reported in, and then it's down to officers to make sure that it gets appropriately routed. But it is really a key thing that people are confident in being able to report stuff coming into us.
Yeah, I think I know you talk about whistleblowing. I think I'm talking about things that probably I wouldn't feel constituted whistleblowing because it's not a huge problem. But you come across something and you think, you know what? If I'm seeing it there, it's probably happening in other places too.
Yeah, we touched on discussions about the councillor online as well, didn't we? And so we are going to be having a scrutiny through that from not just the service perspective, but is there any perhaps activity that we ought to be putting our audit lens on?
Thank you, Pete. Any other questions? Is there a proposal to agree the recommendations, I think is set out in paragraph 7 of the report? Jane, seconder. Gemma, thank you. All agreed? Yeah. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, Grant Thornton Progress Report and Sector Update. As members have read the report, can I ask Felina de Souza, have I, apologies if I've got that, I made a real mess of your name. Was that okay?
It's absolutely right, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who's a Senior Manager, Public Sector Audit at Grant Thornton. If you wish to sort of tease out any specific issues that you'd like to make the committee aware of, please do so, and I'll hand the time to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Morning all. Just to introduce myself, I think my first committee meeting, good to see you this morning. So I'm a senior manager, as you mentioned. So I've been in public sector audit for over 20 odd years. Qualified in commercial in London, and for the last 20 plus years I've been in public sector in the north. And I've pretty much sort of in the, worked for the Audit Commission, the top 4 firm in Leeds, and then for the last 6 years I've been with GT. So that's my background, and really pleased that, I've replaced Paminda Sethi as the senior manager of this audit, and look forward to, serving Doncaster Council as the external audit capacity. In terms of the progress report, Chair, I'll take this as read, and if you going to pack page 51, which summarize sort of, what happened previously last year audit cycle. Since I think Georgia and Paminda presented the audit finding report and the auditor's annual report on the 26th of November, Georgia signed off the audited accounts, I think 9th December, which is a very good outcome for Doncaster. I think it's one of the very early audit sign-offs in the north in our firm. So that's a very good outcome. And we'll move on to, once we finish the audit cycle, we move on to the next audit cycle, because your year end is, very soon, 31st March. In terms of 25-26 audit cycle, we'll already have, quite a lot of cumulative knowledge and experience of Donny, and we will use that, and we'll be very soon, next month onwards, we'll be starting our interim work, and we will present our audit plan, as I think in prior years, in April audit committee, and then we will move on to that audit plan will have the key significant risks that we have identified for 25-26 audit year, and what are proposed responses to those. Then we will, from July onwards, we are planning to do the main substantive audit work, and aiming to sort of sign off the accounts by end of November. In terms of value for money, Chair, obviously similar to the audit opinion, we issued the final value for money report on the same day, 9th December, but that was presented to this committee on the 26th December. And I think the findings from that report and the knowledge we have will be taken forward for our next year's work, as well as any other risk arising. Our audit plan that will present to this committee in April will have any VFM risks as well, Chair. Moving on to obviously page 52, the audit fees that's approved by public sector audit appointments, and happy to take any questions on that. And obviously, as you know, we have a lot of events that we present to our clients, and the immediate one is for phase sort of accounts team chief accountants workshop that we have already sent the invites, and the phase colleagues have accepted those. So that will cover what are the key risks, what are the things that the chief accountants and the teams need to understand and get the opportunity to question us as well. And page 53 covers the our planned delivery timetable. As you can see, Chair, audit plan April, and the other key documents in November plan. So the rest is a sector update that we provide for information for the members, what's happening in the sector. And if you have any questions, we can take it back and come back on that. But I'll pause here and happy to take any questions.
Thank you. No, really appreciate that, and welcome to the team for this rotation. And also thanks to Faye and the finance team for running a very tight ship when it comes to the annual reports. Appreciate Doncaster's a little bit standout in terms of getting those sort of done ahead of our peers. So that's always good news. I only have one question. It's just really around whether there's any early warning signals from the audit work completed to date that have not necessarily been formalised as a finding, but anything that you want to give the audit committee a heads up on.
To be honest, Chair, it's very early stages. We're 25, 26 now, so we're just starting the planning in terms of bringing forward any cumulative knowledge, getting updates for anything new from officers, and the interim work will actually probably take place in March, where we actually do some early testing. So obviously we'll report any findings in the plan at that stage if we found anything, or if there was anything urgent, obviously we'd communicate with you earlier.
Okay, thank you. Faye.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words. I just wanted to bring to the committee's attention that the date for bringing the accounts, the completed accounts, is currently in the diary for October. We would like to discuss with you, having had further conversations, and as I'd highlighted in the progress report, Thelina and Georgia have just kind of asked if we could move that to a slightly later date in November. So we'll be having conversations about that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Faye. Any questions from members?
Yeah, just a quick one. Obviously, you mentioned about webinars coming for audit committee members. Will that be circulated to us? And also, are they recorded? Because I'm conscious I might miss a couple as well. It'd be interesting to sit in here.
I'll check on whether they're recorded, but yeah, definitely as soon as we get kind of dates and invites for the webinars, we'll circulate those to you. And it usually just has a link where you can register, to join. But yeah, I'll check on the recording and get back to you if that's okay.
Thank you. Is there a proposal to note the report? Gemma, thank you. Seconded. Yeah. Jane. The report is noted. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 9. We've got through this at record pace. Very efficient today. And this, I believe, is our first sort of strategic risk deep dive. And we're sort of focused on the 2030 and 2040 carbon reduction and supporting people to live healthy and independent lives. Risk. All members have read the reports, so I'll invite Pete to give some open remarks and sort of bring any issues or specific matters to the attention of this committee. Pete, over to you.
Okay, Chair. So this follows on from our discussions about the Audit Committee work programme back in last summer. We talked about the Strategic Risk Register coming twice a year to Audit Committee, so that came to November's Audit Committee, and following that we talked about a programme of deep dives, and these two reports basically represent our first go at doing those. It'd be very helpful to get some feedback around the information that's presented and how members can be sort of better informed about the risks going forward. So I don't think there's anything more that I can add to it. Shall I hand over to Richard and Alan? I think
we definitely can. Just before we do that, I think we've got a question.
Yeah, sorry,
comment from Debbie.
A comment, if you don't mind, Chair, which is we bring the information in order to help advise and provide, to use your word, assurance really around that there's the efficacy of arrangements in place. It's not so much about, because I was just a bit about knowing the topic itself. It's about the processes, your role as Audit Committee. I just wanted to re-centre you so that, because this is our first voyage in this, in terms of using the material to exemplify and illustrate the assurance of the process itself. So it's that lens that you should be looking through, not topic specific. If you're minded to, in terms of understanding the challenges that people have around managing barriers to achieving our corporate objectives, which is what strategic risk management about, and that what this is about. That's the domain of a scrutiny panel. So I just wanted to make sure we were super clear about the boundaries of this committee's consideration vis-a-vis the scrutiny role.
No, thank you, David. It's a really, really good call out. I think all members are hopefully very, very clear about our role relative to overview and scrutiny. But yeah, definitely worth sort of reiterating. Can Debbie, Richard, sorry, I can't see your nameplate in the middle. Alan. Rachel. Yeah, welcome to the committee. Maybe just before we sort of turn to you, whether there's any opening remarks or questions from Audit Committee members? No? Can I maybe a good idea, maybe just to give some context if we do get a little bit of a synopsis on the risk itself, the risks themselves?
We've tried to shape the methodology for considering, so it will be super helpful in terms of, from a committee's perspective, whether they're getting sufficient, you know, in terms of the structure of how we've set these reports out, whether that provides, because they're the key lines of inquiry, and again, in terms of the audit committee, getting assurances about the process as opposed to the topic specific. Does the key lines of inquiry, are they sufficient in order to give you that you're looking through the right lenses, for example? We've stepped into your space and we're trying to think from your perspective in order to provide the frame. So it'd be really helpful for the committee to provide some feedback in relation to those key lines of inquiry.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Councillor Cox.
Can I just clarify how we chose these two topics for the first committee? Because obviously we all know there's something that we all live, sleep and breathe, I'm sure, that we would consider probably more of a strategic risk at the moment to the council, but we haven't chosen it, we've chosen these two, so I just wonder what the thought process was behind the choices.
Yeah, so we were a little bit tight on time after the last audit committee, and basically Faye and I had a look through the strategic risk register. We could see, for example, the SEND one. We knew that there was the white paper coming out later on this month or early next month, so it won't be appropriate to look at that. The MTFS, that wasn't the budget process underway at the moment, so that would be better looked at later on. And just basically by the process of elimination, these two look to be reasonable ones for us to have a look at first time round. And as we touched on earlier, there's a programme drafted out of the strategic risks, which I'm wanting to share with yourselves. I've put a meeting in our calendars to be able to go through it and review it. And from there, it's basically down to committee to approve which deep dives are going through.
Okay, and I guess this was a relatively straightforward candidate to kind of kick the tires on this new process. So yeah, I sort of appreciate why this might have been sort of brought forward. And I think when I look at this risk, it sort of appears, well, clearly long-term, cross-cutting, dependent on funding, I can see dependent on technology, behavioural change. The mitigations do seem largely strategic and future-facing. So that's the kind of, I was trying to get my head around that. I was also looking at the risk of treating climate commitment as policy aspiration rather than delivery risk. So that was something I was kind of toying with in my head. And one thing I really struggle with, I guess, in terms of process is without measurable interim controls, the risk at face value may appear well managed, but could drift off track materially. And we may not know that until it's quite late in the day in the future. So I did have a question around interim milestones. How do we segment this risk into blocks with clear measures around our expectations at those points in time? Otherwise, I think we could for the next 10 years think it's all in order and the risk is well managed, but actually in reality there's some latency that comes out quite late in the day. There's probably a lot there, but I think you get the general drift. It's a long-term risk. how do we ensure that we're effectively on track?
I'll start then. Really good question. And as you've rightly, in your introduction there, you've described the risk with all its tentacles in lots of different areas. And I think that's how we need to position this as a strategic risk. Also, you'll note within the paper that the UK has, carbon budgets which are chunked up. And again, that's helpful towards the UK target of 2050. And you'll also see in there the range of activity that flows from things like housing, transport, is helpful in terms of what that looks like, and it also is helpful to discern the difference between council activity and out there as well, as in they're interrelated things that's going forward. So it's quite a difficult one to achieve what I suppose you're asking, and it's also something that across the UK, this is something that's being wrestled with in every local authority area in some way, shape or form, because this is a national thing that we are facing and working towards.
Thank you. Wait, did you? It looked like you had something to say. No. Okay. Richard.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to build on a response from Alan. Since 2005 was the baseline that we measure our performance against, and a scientific methodology has been used to project and forecast our carbon reductions, which was from 2005 through to 2040 is expected to achieve 14% year on year. Now, if we continue to achieve a 14% reduction year on year through to 2030 and 2040, certainly through to 2030, then we can meet our interim targets. You are right, the paper does speak more so to what is happening nationally. However, what we've tried to do, certainly over the last couple of years, is to help people understand the various actions and measures that are undertaken to help achieve these targets, deliver operational efficiency for the council. So first and foremost, we want to reduce consumption. Of course, you then have the objectives which are higher up in terms of net zero and climate, but there are other things that are motivating the actions that we undertake other than just net zero and climate. So while we are dependent on some of those legislative and national movements, we also have a clear motivation locally to achieve these targets, because they deliver operational efficiency for the council and improve use of resources. So the decarbonisation of the electricity grid, the decarbonisation of heat and transport and so on, we are undertaking the right kind of actions in order to track the savings and achieve our targets. Of course, we undertake quarterly reporting now. We also do annual reporting. So yes, it could slip away from us if we weren't doing anything, but we are, and we have an active plan, and we're working to that. There's also increasingly greater levels of investment that are being announced by not only the government, but also private industry. So the outlook is positive. It doesn't say that this is going to be easy at any chance, because the 85% 2030, the 2030 interim milestone is something that is more so achievable. Achieving net zero by 2040, is 15 years or 14 years away, that have many changes nationally, locally, globally that could hinder that. So I think we're taking the right actions. We can monitor this and keep a close eye on this quarterly and annually, and we can bring this to the attention of Audit Committee should it be a future focus, to either give confidence that we continue to undertake the right actions, we're responding to the right kind of motivations, we're doing the right thing for the council and Doncaster, and if that does change, we can highlight what those risks are and why performance isn't as expected.
Thank you. Yeah, really appreciate the thorough answers there. Any further follow-ons from this side? Gemma.
Apologies, it might sound more like scrutiny than it is audit, but I'm just quite interested. Obviously, government's announced like taxation to electric vehicles and the movement. Will that impact or mitigate any like costs to the council, or do you think the transport changeover to electric fleet completely will be continue as normal without any additional costs?
The government's proposal for the taxation of mileage is an interesting one, rather than a straightforward road tax. Of course, based on our fleet movements and an average mileage, our vehicles are undertaking in general around about 10,000 miles per year. So based on the vehicle and the final costs that are agreed, we can undertake assessment to understand whether the road tax is the equivalent or less or greater than the new suggested taxation on electric vehicle movement.
Thank you. Any further questions? Shall we move on to people to live healthy, independent lives, just to focus on this one? Don't grade my summary of the risk. I feel like I'm being interviewed. So when I read this one, just as a sort of brief opening remark, high impact risks driven by demographics, demand growth, system-wide dependencies, I thought that was a really interesting piece. Includes adult social care, SEND and public health. I look at some of the assurance language and it's broadly positive. It does feel like we could benefit from some further clarity on ownership and time-bound actions, and particularly given the sort of the number of sort of partners and stakeholders involved in this, whether that will be a challenge in managing this risk. So I think that's where I was kind of focused on this. Face value looks really good, assurance looks really strong, but do we have the right sort of clarity and focus on ownership, actions, distinction between management narrative, advisory support, and independence assurance was something else that I kind of started to look at as well. So maybe just some remarks on those.
Sure. So I'm Rachel Leslie. I'm Director of Public Health, and the supporting people to live healthy, independent lives is a risk that I own. It's been broadly stable since it's been described as a strategic risk for the council, although you've picked up, Chair, how some of those population changes and challenges have affected the risk score over time. Yes, you're correct. So one of my things that I must do is ensure that this list of services is available for the Doncaster population. There's various levels of assurance that are described in the report. So if Doncaster doesn't have one of those services, then OHID, the Office of Health Improvement and Disparities, will be in touch with me pretty sharply to understand why that's not in place. So we've got that external kind of governance arrangement too. One of the things that an audit committee might be particularly interested in is the use of the Public Health Ring Fence grant. So it is a ring fence grant, and ring fence for a list of things that it can be used on. My perspective in Doncaster is that is well allocated and well supported by finance. So other areas might report a concern that they don't have that same level of access as the Director of Public Health to those Public Health Ring Fence grant resources. I have described towards the end of the report that there's a new national programme that we're expecting to come in the next few years, where there'll be a peer review that will assure again where's that money being spent and what's the public health value that's coming out from it. Under section 3, I've given you lots of detail about how we commission services, how we use benchmarking nationally, how we use tools to ensure that we're resourcing and planning our services and that we're using our population data. I've also described our local arrangements, and you've asked there about that spread of responsibilities. So we've got public health leads in the team, and the responsibility for commissioning each of those listed services sits with a public health lead. So they've got that subject specialist knowledge, and they work with procurement when we're in a position to need to go out for procurement of that service. We would do health needs assessment. We would benchmark what our cost is to ensure that we're resourcing that properly, and then we'll go out again with a set procurement process. So our public health theme lead, supported by procurement colleagues, ensure that we do all the right things to get the best possible provider for Doncaster. There isn't always a brilliant market for some of our services, so things like NHS health checks, we had to go out for 3 times to secure a provider for that, and I've reported in here that we're not quite getting the level of uptake that we wanted to, and we've added that to our performance reporting as well, so hoping to describe that to Overview and Scrutiny Management Committee in the future too. So again, we oversee how our service is delivered. We've got agreed key performance indicators with those, and we enact different contractual arrangements where we've got underperformance too. Just some of the other governance that we've got in place. So we have a quarterly public health governance meeting that covers various different topics, but performance across services is included in that as well. And that's that chance for all of our public health leads to come together and describe the areas that they're responsible for as well. The last bits that I've noted again where I've said there's governance oversight coming in all sorts of directions. So many of our commission services are also subject to CQC, so Care Quality Commission inspection as well. And we as commissioners of those services would act if we were concerned about any reports that came our way. Just to mention, so we've had a couple of items on the public health audit list. So we had post-COVID a number of small community grants that went out really quickly to support communities, and we asked for Audit asked to support us with the process of seeing how we administrated that as a process. So we've taken on board some recommendations and acted those as well. We've also got one of the things I mentioned at the start was the public health ring fence grant. So we allocate a proportion of that, around 21%, to wider determinants, so work across the council that influences people's health and well-being, anticipating that national approach to peer review. We want to be really clear with how we use that and what the public health outcomes are and how they can be strengthened in some cases. So we've begun that programme with some audit support over the last year. So hopefully that addresses some of the questions you've had today. Thanks, Chair.
Great, thank you so much. Maybe just a follow on, Rachel, if you don't mind. So looking at the risk, there's clearly a lot of mitigation actions that sit across multiple bodies. And I think this backs into an early question around there doesn't seem to be a single point of accountability, which potentially leaves the council exposed if a system partner fails to deliver. So practically speaking, on the ground, how do we manage that?
Yeah, so that is, I am the single point of accountability as a statutory director for public health. So this is all, and it comes in the guide. So this is one of my key roles and responsibilities as a director of public health. I obviously can't do all of these things by myself. So that's why we have a team in place to conduct them. And things like our public health governance meeting are my way to understand across the team that all of those things are happening in the way that they should.
Okay, fantastic. That's yeah, really good. And that accountability it can be enforced. So if you rely on a partner who has a mitigation action and they fail to deliver, you have essentially teeth. You can do something with that accountability.
Yeah, so all of our contracts are in place with all of our providers, and there'll be contractual mechanisms within those as well. So one of the ones that I've described in here is smoking cessation, which has had a lower performance. So we've had the same provider for some time, reissued a new contract. As we were issuing that, the government put in additional funding for smoke-free. So for Doncaster, that's that equates to, I think, nearly £1 million each year, and that's to really accelerate that quit and that smoke-free generation. So as we've apportioned that money to get more quitters, we've probably drawn activity away from that service as well. So more through primary care, more through St Ledger, more through our school nursing service. However, we've negotiated with the provider that we still want them to strive for that same level of activity and that they need to work differently. So each of our contracts will have contractual levers that will enable us to work with them as well on how they meet our conditions.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. Any final questions from this side? No? Okay. Debbie.
Could I make a broader point? Both of these you probably appreciate, and I can hear the line, the sort of angle that you're coming at, is there's bigger aspirations and there's bigger challenges ahead. I think it'd probably just be worth us centering in what the council can do as part of these wider societal issues. I mean, I was listening this morning, Radio 4, about the Augsburg, and I'm not absolutely sure where it is. that's 2 kilometres, sat on top of 2 kilometres deep, and it's currently melting at a rate of knots. So they're going to drill down the middle and basically see how what's happening in relation to that. We're not going to stop that, but what we can do is what we can do. So I just think it's, in terms of the context of what Rachel's been talking about, we set our ambitions in the context of the wider societal challenges about supporting people to live a healthy and independent lives within the context of the statutory responsibilities and the resources that we have as a council. So the strategic risk is set in that wider context, but in the guise of what we can do from a corporate plan point of view and the resources we have, and the statutory and legal responsibilities we have. So you ask a good question about if a partner isn't discharging their responsibility, and one partner might be doing the best that they can for, I don't know, falls, for example. But can Rachel, so people who are getting old and frail, that might be something that we agree as a system that needs more resources, but that falls isn't usually something that the council resources. It's usually another health partner. So there could be conversations taking place in relation to that matter, but Rachel's not in a position that she can demand, I'm wagging my finger, direct. We can, we collectively, so you'll have heard conversations about Team Doncaster and about, as a wider partnership, we work as best we can across the whole piece, but other people have, other entities have, and I know there was like a conversation about part of this in full council about another medical matter. We can do what we can do, and I think that's what we're reporting on. So we set our risk in the context of a collective, and we report, because these are about, the risk management is about mitigating barriers to achieving that objective. So again, just hopefully you're seeing it in the context. We can't solve all problems in society. What we can do is what we can do within those resourcing bounds and those statutory bounds, and through the conversations we have and the influence that we have with those other organisations. So I just want, at an early juncture, because we're going to probably have these type of conversations, because we, as you know, as Doncaster, we have a high ambition around our degree of influence, but that is what it is. So if you can, in the context of hearing from other people, because you'll have other officers presenting, if you can just consider it in that guise as well, I think that'd be super helpful.
No, that's really good, actually. Yeah, I mean, where I was kind of going with this is we've got inherent risk, then we have a series of mitigation actions that net to a residual risk. And I appreciate these are strategic, so by their nature, they're complex, lots of moving parts, lots of external influences. And I think we as a committee have to ensure that we're looking at the mitigation plan with that in mind. We can't always control everything, and that's okay as long as that's baked into the mitigation plan. So we almost have a risk profile against the mitigation plan on some really large strategic risks. And I think it's that transparency and sort of realism that I think we need to consider. I think this has been a really useful exercise, 2 really interesting risks, 2 really complex risks. I think we probably need to tune our sort of skills on how we look and scrutinise these in the context of Audit Committee, because we're not scrutiny, so we need to make sure we're doing that really sharply. But thank you guys for coming to committee today. That's really good. Appreciate your time. Just before we close on this agenda item, is there a proposal to note the information provided? Thank you, Jane, and seconded. Frank, thank you. The report is noted. That concludes the items of business on today's agenda. Thanks everyone for attending. and I now declare the meeting closed. Thank you.